Hello, my speech today will cover British agriculture regarding agricultural size. I will use Clapham books as a reference book. There is a section in this book which is related with the agricultural growth in Britain at that time. I particularly focus on what steps taken by reformers will be summed up in this video. Rather than aggregating more small holdings, some large ones had been subdivided. If the agricultural returns may be taken at their face value, the holdings above 300 acres in Britain had declined by 9% in the quarter of a century in between 1885 and 1910. Since the holdings figures had first been collected and discussed between 1885 and 1910, they have sometimes been turned against those many social and agrarian reformers who wanted to set townsmen back on the land or somehow to give countrymen a bigger share in it. Were there not small holdings already enough? It was suggested for any reasonable requirement or policy. The argument always misleading because of the very mixed and largely non-agricultural character of small holdings, or the statistics left most reformers cold, especially those of the 80s and 90s. There were more small working farmers in the West than in the East, and the circumstances of depression had favored the West. Rentals in Wales and Cheshire had fallen comparatively little. Whether the small dairy farm was essentially a more economic unit than some factory dairy farm of the type of which developed subsequently in America may be doubted, but it has special advantages for survival at that time. In discussing arable and general mixed farming, friends of small holdings never went so far as to argue that they were certainly more productive acre by acre than large ones. Only that they were economically possible and socially most desirable. This was the view of a select committee of the Commons appointed in 1888 to inquire the facilities which exist for the creation of small holdings in Great Britain. The resulting act, which came into force in October 1892, empowered the new country council to buy land and adopt it for small holdings. These were to be resolved on a hire purchase system with an initial deposit by the purchaser, but to men who could not find a deposit, the council might let areas not exceeding 15 acres. The act was a blank failure. Critics often argued that it might have been more successful if the council had been given more compulsory powers or purchase. Whatever the explanation, 14 years after the act, the country councils in Great Britain had acquired 812 acres, of which less than 300 had been sold as peasant properties. There were always stern partisans of the allotment and small holdings who held that landlords should be compelled to sell for allotments the new parish councils had been given in modified form the compulsory power granted to local authorities in 1887 extended to the provision of allotments up to 4 acres in size. The country councils were given compulsory powers to acquire land for small holdings, but this was the lesser change. In the event, these powers were comparatively little used. The greater was that the Board of Agriculture, not grown into a powerful department of the central government, was instructed to appoint a special commissioner who were to ascertain local needs and facilities to action and, if necessary, set them an example. Observers a few years later were struck by the local way in the act had been carried out by councils composed to a large extent of men who disagree with its principles. The statistical results was impressive. By the end of 1914, 14,000 small holdings of an average size of about 14 acres had come into existence under the Act. As there were 292,000 holdings in England and Wales of the class ranging 1 to 50 acres, into which new ones fell, and as many of them were not really agricultural holdings. This was a considerable administrative achievement for 7 years. Yet, an achievement not to be overrated as an episode in agrarian history. Firstly, because while the planned holdings had increased, the total of holdings of 150 acres in the country had actually declined, though the important group from 20 to 50 acres, into which some of the planned holdings fell, had grown. Secondly, because the chief successes had been in parts of country, the fens, Bedfordshire, and in the class of specialized farming or gardening, fruit, vegetables, milk and poultry, for which small holding was already a proved success and was already developing steadily. But was the work likely to be enduring? And this will be covered in the second part.